alert, major bag alert.
I like to think I live a productive life. I try my best to stay busy and not spend all day sitting in my room on my computer aimlessly browsing the internet. I say this knowing full well that I have over 500 hours on World of Warcraft, and just a couple more on Fortnite and League of Legends. I often find myself being told by my parents to get a hobby outside of basketball, and I really don't do anything in my spare time. Last year, I was in my room browsing YouTube, again, because I live a very fulfilling life, when I saw a video in my recommended. It was a fan film for something called Warhammer 40k. Usually when I hear fan film, I think about something like this.
I wonder if that's Phil.
Hmm.
No.
We'll be alright.
But this was on another level. This is Astartes, a Warhammer fan film made by one guy. One brave lunatic made this just for fun. After I saw this video, I was like, oh, okay, I get it. Then I spent the next 6 hours watching Warhammer videos and reading about things like the lore and the tabletop game and how I can get into it.
Let me first explain what Warhammer even is. Warhammer is a tabletop miniature war game set in the 41st century where all progress and advancement the universe has made has been forgotten and all there is left is war. Every faction is at least a little bit evil, and it is so fun. I'm going to try my best to briefly explain the lore, but I'm probably going to leave out a lot because there's just so much. So it all starts with this dude. He's the God Emperor of mankind. Think Jesus, but like 14 feet tall and a wizard. In this universe, there isn't magic, but there is something called the warp, which we will talk about later. It's like hell, but in space. Every emotion or thought you have is projected into the warp, and some people, who are called psychers, can channel that hell zone, the warp, through their minds and basically do spells and stuff. The God Emperor, big time psycher. Possibly the best. He led humanity out of their darkest age, and he began to conquer every planet in the Milky Way galaxy. One day he thought, hey, it might be a great idea to have some suns to help me conquer harder. So he used magic and science to create 20 suns known as the Primarchs. Basically just mini emperors, but they were all unique in their own way. Anyway, due to some unforeseen circumstances, the Primarchs were shot across the galaxy to different planets. The Emperor spent the next little while conquering and looking for his kids until he found his first son, Horus. By the way, none of the other Primarchs matter as much, so I'm not going to talk about them. After some time passed, the Primarchs were all grown up, and 18 of them had been found. The Emperor had almost completed the thing he wanted to do most, when Horus decided, you know, I'm just going to leave my brothers and become a devil worshipper. So Horus and half the Primarchs tried to kill the Emperor. This was one of the most important events in Warhammer. It is referred to as the Horus Heresy. Now all the Primarchs didn't do this for nothing. They all had their own motivations and goals, but I'm not going to talk about them. So after a couple of Primarchs had died, Horus finally decided to man up and 1v1 his father. The battle between Horus and Emperor was pretty bananas. Horus had managed to mortally wound the Emperor before the Emperor finally decided that he was sick of Horus and his bullshit, and he just soul blasted him out of existence. With his dying breath, the Emperor sat down on something called the Golden Throne, which would keep him alive forever, as long as 1,000 souls were sacrificed to him a day. 10,000 years later, the Emperor is nothing but a rotting corpse in a chair, and humanity has dissolved into a crazy racist group of people, and they're all zealots for the Emperor. If you even for a second doubt the Emperor, you will be struck down as a heretic. So remember those Primarchs? They all had their own armies of mini Primarchs, called the Space Marines. They're the dudes from that fan film. You see, they're not just space soldiers. They're 8 feet tall, and they're on so many steroids and enhancements you can't even count. They can breathe underwater, and can spit acid. Each Legion of Space Marines is also unique in the way that their Primarch is. So the Ultramarines are good at everything, the Death Guards smell bad, the Thousand Sons are all huge nerds, and the Emperor's children who don't fight and they just do space coke all day. Now, that's just the lore for humanity. There's even more lore for every single race in Warhammer, but I'm only going to talk about a few. The Tyranids are a bunch of super adaptive space bugs who don't actually think at all, and they just eat and destroy planets to benefit the hive mind. There's the Eldar, who are just elves and super pretentious. There's the Tau, who are a bunch of communist space weeaboos who are too frail to use melee combat. Then there's the Orcs. This is the army I play. They're a bunch of big dumb brutes, and they're the most numerous race in the galaxy.
The only reason they haven't taken over is because they're too busy fighting each other, just because they can. They also love to drag race. There's the Chaos Space Marines, who are just Space Marines, but boosted by whatever Chaos God they decide. Then there's the Chaos Spawn, who are just a bunch of little demon monsters, indifferent depending on which Chaos God they come from. Like the demons of Khorne, the Blood God. He doesn't care about anything but war, death, and violence. His demons are all about melee combat and beating you to death. Then there's Zeech, God of Change and Magic. He's kind of a bastard. He's the guy who caused the whole Horus Heresy just because he likes to mess with stuff. And he's all about scheming and pranks. His demons are horrible in melee combat, but are absolute units in magic and spells. There's Nurgle, who's quite disgusting. He's all about death, stagnation, decay, and disease. Anything gross and stinky, he loves it. His demons are super tanky, they don't feel pain, and they don't even care. Finally, there's Slaanesh, the youngest of the Chaos Gods, and they're all about drugs and rock and roll. Just the love, the excess emotions, and torture. Now, this is not all the races in Warhammer. As much as I want to and as much as you want to hear it, I will not explain every race. The script already has 3 pages, and I really don't have the willpower to edit much more. The last thing I want to talk about is the tabletop game and the miniatures. The miniatures come in these big sheets of plastic, and you have to cut them out and glue them together, then paint them. When it comes to painting them, there's really no rules, and you just paint them however you want them to look. For some factions, though, there's different rules depending on what color you paint them, like the different legions of Space Marines being different, or the orcs believing that different colors have powers. Personally, I paint my orcs blue because they are part of the Death Skull clan and they believe blue is lucky, so I get to re-roll my missed shots. Each player takes turns going back and forth through the phases of the turn with the goal of either killing all the enemy units or completing an objective. The order of the phases goes like this. Movement phase, where units can be moved a certain number of inches depending on the unit's stats. Psychic phase, where if an army has any psychers, they can cast spells. Shooting phase, where the player rolls a dice to see if their bullets hit or not. Charge phase, where the player rolls to take a chance to try to make their units charge into another. Fight phase, where both players roll dice to make their units beat each other up. Then finally morale phase, where each player rolls dice to see if either player has cowardly units who run away from the battle. Warhammer is a hobby I and many other people enjoy, and I intend to continue to paint models and play the tabletop game into the foreseeable future.